Welcome to the Inside Elections podcast, where we analyze elections in a nonpartisan, data-driven, and accessible way. In this episode, we'll take a fresh look at the Republican chances of holding the House majority nearly a year out from the midterm elections. We'll look at the latest polling numbers in the race for governor in New Jersey this year, and we'll talk about the intersection of sports and politics with our special guest, Steve Kornacki of NBC News. Buckle up. I'm Nathan Gonzales, editor and publisher of Inside Elections, the go-to place for nonpartisan analysis for more than 40 years. And I'm headed to Oregon's 5th District for a speech, also some high school football. That's a mid-Willamette Valley and Central Oregon district represented by Democrat Janelle Bynum.
I'm Jacob Rubashkin, deputy editor of Inside Elections, and I am in the midst of a 3 congressional district tour, starting with Massachusetts' 5th congressional district, Cambridge, Massachusetts, represented by Democrat Katherine Clark for a conference at Harvard. Currently, Michigan's 6th congressional district, represented by Debbie Dingell. That's the Ann Arbor area. And this coming weekend, headed back to my alma mater, Cornell University, for the Cornell Daily Sun. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, New York's 19th district, represented by Democrat Josh Riley. So more congressional districts in a week than I'm normally in any given month being in DC, but an exciting time to be had.
Before we bring Steve in, what are some headlines that people shouldn't miss, Jacob?
So Arizona's 1st District Congressman David Schweikert is running for governor of Arizona, opening up his very competitive Scottsdale area district. There was already a competitive Democratic primary in that seat between 2024 nominee Amish Shah, news anchor Marlene Galan Woods, and several other well-funded candidates. They'll get a lot more attention. There'll probably be a race on the Republican side as well. And this is one of the most evenly divided districts in the country. So certainly one to watch over the next 14 months.
The national immigration story about ICE arresting the superintendent of the Des Moines, Iowa school district had an election impact because the Des Moines school board chair is Jackie Norris, who is running for the Iowa Senate seat, currently represented by Republican Joni Ernst, who is not running for re-election. But Norris is in a competitive Democratic primary. And Jacob, as you wrote in the most recent issue of Inside Elections, her campaign already had some critics. And so I think this is not going to be helpful in trying to break out of a field of some other credible candidates.
Well, I think it'll help her stand out, but perhaps not in the ways that she wanted to. It's not a flattering spotlight, and I think it may, impact her ability to fundraise, which was already kind of the primary issue there. In Wisconsin, a Republican businessman and Navy SEAL veteran Bill Berrien dropped out of the gubernatorial primary after reports that he followed numerous sexually explicit accounts on the essay platform Medium. That leaves Representative Tom Tiffany and Washington County Executive Josh Schuman as the most prominent Republican candidates. The Democratic primary is large and growing larger, already includes Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez, Milwaukee County Executive David Crawley, and several state legislators.
There's probably been 2 candidates who have jumped into that race since we've been talking on this episode already. And according to Politico this morning, President Donald Trump is considering finding a primary challenger to Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire if she doesn't lead the Republican majorities in the legislature to redraw the state's congressional map. Now, the pressure isn't a surprise, and Democrats control both of the state's congressional districts. But it's remarkable that the White House pressure campaigns have come up to this point in states that Trump won in 2024, while he finished behind Vice President Kamala Harris by about 3 points in New Hampshire in 2024. So we'll see. The White House is clearly trying to squeeze every district they can everywhere. But the Governor Ayotte has been very public about she doesn't want to do it. And so we'll see who ends up winning this battle. I want to welcome our very special guest, Steve Kornacki. Steve is a former politics editor at Salon. He had a cup of coffee covering Congress for Roll Call, was an MSNBC host and co-host before becoming the chief data analyst for NBC News. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, really good to be here. And Nathan, great to see you again after all these years.
It's been a little while. Yeah, you and Jacob got a chance to connect last week at the Harvard Political Data Analytics Conference, and which helped us get to this point. So welcome.
Yeah, no, happy to do this.
Now, before we get into topics, tell us what congressional district you grew up in.
I am from what you would now call the 3rd District of Massachusetts. I'm from outside Lowell, Massachusetts. That's Lori Trahan is the congresswoman there now.
And what was life like in Massachusetts 3rd District back then?
Well, let's see here. When I was growing up, the congressman would have been Marty Meehan. I don't know if anybody remembers that name. He was there for a while. He's the president of the University of Massachusetts now.
Great accent.
Yeah, I know. It's a classic Marty. Yeah, I remember actually one of the very first political campaigns I remember was he challenged. This was unusual back then, I guess, but he challenged an incumbent Democrat in 1992, Chet Atkins, and he crushed him. I wonder if there's a trivia question there about like the worst margin of defeat for an incumbent Democrat in a primary, because I think Meehan beat Atkins by like 30 points in that election.
Wow. Well, Atkins is a subscriber, so maybe he'll. We've actually got him on the phone now.
Didn't mean to ruin his day. Sorry.
There we go. We're starting off strong here.
Was it a redistricting primary that caused him to lose by so much?
Yeah, not to go too in the weeds on 30-year-old history in the 5th congressional district of Massachusetts, but it was like basically redistricting was happening. And I think the story I always heard was, if you remember this name, Billy Bulger, who was the president of the Massachusetts State Senate. His brother was Whitey Bulger, who was on the lam, I believe the thing was that Billy didn't like Chet Atkins, and he kind of got Chet to say he wanted Lowell, the city of Lowell and Lawrence, out of the district. And then once he said it, he put it in. He made sure it stayed in. And basically what happened was Meehan came from Lowell and just crushed Atkins in Lowell. And Atkins, I think, was more the suburban guy to begin with, and it was just no match. He just got overwhelmed in numbers. Yeah.
So we know what you're doing now, but back then, what did you think you would be doing now when you were growing up in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I went through a period where I thought I'd be a dentist. I remember that. It seemed like it was a sensible occupation, reliable source of income, and not that I was too interested in teeth, but I thought that for a while. And I think I always thought I'd be back teaching. I always thought I would teach like high school. I think that's where I kind of thought I would end up doing.
Well, now you're teaching just in a different way on some large and small screens, and you are teaching. So I guess there's a connection there.
Stand in front of that board, stand in front of the blackboard. There's probably some overlap.
Well, there's a lot to talk about. So let's jump in. We are just over a year from the 2026 midterm elections, and the prime battle is for the House majority. A couple months ago, Steve, you did a great segment about the historical trend working against Republicans as the party in control of the White House. But you mentioned one example that might be encouraging for the GOP. Let's take a listen.
You just see losses here. That's the history that Republicans are up against, that they're trying to defy. Is there any encouraging note for them in this history? Well, ironically, it might be this one right here, the most recent, Joe Biden, 2022. We'll just call this up on the screen quickly. In 2022, Joe Biden was not popular. 44% approval rating. Trump's 45% right now. It was a 9-seat loss for Democrats in 2022. If Republicans lose 9, they lose the House. But 9's not that much more than 3. So ironically enough, I think if there's any hope for Republicans to draw from midterm history, Ryan, it's the Biden midterm of 22. Democrats didn't do that bad given where Biden was that year.
So a little bit of time has passed since that. What is your current assessment of the national political climate, President Trump's standing? Where do you think things stand today?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think pretty similar, overall to where they were then, just in terms of where Trump's approval rating is. The story continuing to be that, unlike his first term, Trump gets his lowest marks on the economy right now. So I think that basic dynamic, similar. The obviously the big variable we're all watching, I know you guys are watching super close, is this redistricting, the new maps coming in between now and 26. And trying to figure out exactly where that's going to land, because obviously that's such a big variable here. Because when you're talking about potentially similarities between like 22 and 26, the story in 22, obviously Republicans got the House back, but they didn't get the kind of gains I think they were expecting, and I don't think they got the kind of gains that history suggested they were going to get, just based on what Biden's approval rating was at the time. And so I think one of the stories of that kind of emerges from 2022 is, first of all, I think how much this kind of how narrow the sort of truly contested battlefield is becoming in these things. And also I think that's also a reflection just of the increased polarization in these things, where it's sort of like, people know which side they're on, or they know which side they're against in this sort of national political war that we're having. And so it doesn't produce those kinds of wild swings that we've had, in like a 2010 midterm and in 1994, 2006, the big giant wave years. I think that might be something that emerged from 22. And if that is the case in 26, that we're talking about something like that, then this shifting around in the mid-decade redistricting really looms as maybe decisive in this.
And to give listeners a timestamp, we are recording on Tuesday afternoon, and President Trump just said in the Oval Office that a shutdown, nothing is inevitable, but it's probably likely. So assuming that we do go through some sort of shutdown, what impact do you think that will have? What do you see in the numbers there?
Yeah, and it's interesting. My thinking in advance of this one has sort of been like, I think I'm kind of asking, they matter obviously to anybody in the government? Let's stipulate. But if we're just talking about implications for 2026, do these things matter anymore? And I only say that because it seems now we've been through them so many times. We've been through the brinksmanship leading up to them so many times. And my point of reference on this is always about 30 years ago. We were talking about sort of coming of age politically in the 90s. In the 90s, when the Republicans, got power after the Republican Revolution, Gingrich became the speaker, Clinton was the beleaguered president. And, certainly the narrative history of Clinton's presidency is that he had the showdown with Gingrich and the Republicans, where the government was shut down politically. It was a huge event. Clinton won the showdown politically, and it got him on course to win in 96. I think part of what happened back then was so much that was unprecedented. Republicans back then hadn't controlled Congress in 40 years. There had been a shutdown of a few days a couple of years earlier, but this felt like a momentous, almost like world historical event. The government coming to a halt over this partisan, and now we've had 30 years of this kind of partisan fighting. And I just wonder if these things, I know there's polling out there that shows you, hey, Republicans might be blamed a little bit more here on this one. And I'm just not sure how deep that sentiment is. And we also seem to live in this, in this time where it's like, everything is the biggest deal in the world. And then a week later we said, what was that thing we were talking about last week? So I also wonder if this lingers at all.
I'm curious as you look toward the midterm. One question that I have been bandying about a fair amount is, can we apply what we typically know about not just midterms in general, but kind of the 6-year itch, the thing that presidents in their 2-term presidents in their 6th year tend to deal with, that we saw happen to Obama in 2014, which I think arguably was a worse year for Democrats than 2010, even though it doesn't get the same kind of love from those of us who do this kind of work, and kind of the history. 2006 for George W. Bush, Clinton is obviously a little bit of a different story. 86 for Reagan. Can we consider this midterm to be kind of the 6th year of the Trump administration, or because there was this interregnum with Biden that we've never seen before in the modern political era, and because, quite frankly, right, Trump, even though he can't run for another term, talks about things as if he is essentially running for another term? Or do the same rules apply in your mind, or how do you kind of categorize this particular midterm within the larger history as we approach it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not sure many, if any, of the historical rules that we've all kind of learned apply in general, to our politics anymore. I haven't been thinking about this version of the Trump presidency as sort of the traditional second term that would have what you're talking about with the 6-year itch. I haven't thought of it that way, obviously, because of the unusual nature with the 4 years in between, but also the way he's governing now and the way events are unfolding now. This has first term energy to me. I mean, and I think a lot of folks, in fact, aligned with him. Well, I think a lot of Democrats would actually probably share this view. Feel that like you're kind of getting the agenda that they wish they had pursued more the first time around, and they've kind of got this second chance to do it now. That at least that's how they perceive it. And so he's just going in, and they're just going in, with full force here. So it feels to me almost like this is, again, how do you categorize this? But it's almost like the first term that Trump feels he didn't really get, and that his folks feel he didn't really get. What that translates into. Again, I started feeling this way in 2016, right? Because I mean, we looked when Trump first came on the scene, we looked at all of the traditional rules of political analysis, and he wasn't going to be the nominee. He didn't get any endorsements. No members of Congress were behind him. He stepped on all of these supposedly, politically fatal tripwires, and just kept on going. So it made me say back then, I'm not sure how many of these rules still apply. I'm not sure how many of them really were rules to begin with, and we just never tested them.
And what do you say if we even step out of the current, the 2026? What do you say broadly to folks who are poll skeptical, right? They say, I don't trust the polls. They're always wrong. I'm sure that you hear this anytime you get up in front of any group. But your job is data and numbers and digesting polling. So how do you explain or talk about the relevancy and accuracy of polling, where we are today?
The first thing I always make sure to do is tell them the final NBC poll before the 2024 election had it 48-48, and it came in 49-48. So I say we had a good poll.
Yeah, which it was. It was. I mean, that's yeah. Yes.
We did, but I take the point that they're making, and I understand it, and it's a serious one. Look, I think the polling in 24. I hear a lot, look, it missed again. I don't think it missed in 24 the way it missed in 20 and in 16. I do think there's been an issue in getting, in reflecting the true breadth of Trump's support in polling since he came on the stage, back in 16. And remember at first it was just, we thought the simple question of weighting of the difference between white college educated, white non-college educated, just going in two totally different political universes and making sure they were each properly reflected in the polling. I think then we found out that there's more sort of in the areas of just getting these folks to answer surveys, non-response bias, things like that. One thing that I kind of take to heart in, I think, is that I think a lot of it's Trump specific. I think the polling was a lot better overall, like in the 22 midterm, in the 18 midterm. I think as one of the things we were talking about 22 a minute ago, right up to the end in 22, I always felt that it's easy to say now. I mean, but I was certainly vacillating on the air, but it felt like the expectation of a big Republican wave in 22 was always running ahead of the polling. And I do remember that was sort of the framing we were using heading into that election on the air. It was sort of like something's got to give here. If you look at history, if you look at Biden's numbers, if you look at Biden on the economy, the Democrats are staring at catastrophe here. If you look at these polls, it doesn't look that bad for them. And, it ended up being that, that's where it landed. So I think the polling's been better in the midterm elections. I get why people feel this way about it. And I do think that one of the realities, again, we talk about being in this state of polarization paralysis, whatever you want to call it. I think the reality then is when these elections are so close, people are looking for precision in the polling. They're looking almost for decimal point precision, because the difference between, a point or two is everything. And so saying, hey, our poll is a point or two off, when that point or two off is the difference between winning and losing, I think that can disappoint people too, naturally.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, obviously you have made a name and a reputation for yourself with your work at the Magic Wall. The Magic Wall has been kind of one of these great innovations of, modern political coverage, election night coverage specifically. I'm curious what you think the next innovation is. Where does election night coverage go from here? And are there things that you want to do when you get up on air that the technology either doesn't exist for, or you haven't figured out a way, or the head honchos at Comcast say it's too much data, Steve, you can't do that? What's kind of the next frontier that you're looking to explore in presenting all of this data and election results as we move forward?
One thing that I'm always kind of thinking about and talking about here is that the experience of watching an election night sort of online, I think now you can, without turning your television on, I'm not trying to tell people not to, but without turning your television on, the depth of data that you're able to get in real time as the results come in now, it's super, super impressive. It's staggering. It's beyond. I mean, it's just again, whether that's like municipality precinct level results, the needle, right? The New York Times is known for its needle. Not trying to give them advertising here, but so I think there's a real challenge, and this is the challenge for us on air, I think, is to be thinking about some of those tools that are available to people to digest the results and to make sense of the results that are now available, and I think only going to be more and more available and more sophisticated, sort of online. What can we do to incorporate that into our on-air product? But at the same time, I think we have to, the challenge really is recognizing that the people seeking that out online often are people who are super, super into it. I mean, it's a great time to be an election junkie, right? Thinking back, growing up, as we say, in the 90s or something, when I look back at what was available to me in terms of data on any given election night, it was ridiculous, right? And I didn't have, $5,000 back then to subscribe to the hotline to find out what was going on day to day in these races. So it's night and day. But I think there's, you have to respect that the audience there on television on an election night is going to be a very, very broad audience. So not everybody's going to be coming at this with the same sort of reference points and kind of numeracy. But at the same time, I don't want to get left behind. I get worried about getting left behind when I see what's out there.
Not to harp on the needle, but I think what the needle is doing is not so different than what the NBC decision desk is doing, or what the ABC desk or the AP desk or any of these other desks are doing. But their innovation was kind of putting that front and center, giving people the access to see it if they wanted to. And clearly there's been such a great response from online. But I think it's an interesting question of when you've got tens of millions of people tuning into a broadcast who aren't following, the precinct level results in Outagamie County, Wisconsin, with your precious minutes what you devote the time to.
Yeah, no, I've always been like, I think the needle's been a great innovation. And I think it's putting a number on sort of what, you know, what I feel like I'm not looking at it too much when I'm on air because I'm busy doing our own stuff. But when I go back afterwards, we kind of reconstruct the night and we'll look at this stuff. And it's sort of like when I look at the tone of my coverage on the air and I look at what the sort of needle might be at that time, it's sort of like, I feel like if the needle is saying 82%, and then I look at what I'm doing on the air, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like the tone that I would be giving if I knew it was 82%, so the number kind of matches the tone. And so I think it's a good thing to have.
And what is your personal rhythm? This applies both to election night and on a week-to-week basis when you have to take in information, right? You are pulling in numbers and taking in information, but then at some point you have to push it out, right? You have to be on air and make sense of it and digest it all. So is there a certain rhythm on election night where you say, hey, I need X amount of time to just focus on what's happening, and then I know, I have to do that hit? Or from week to week, all right, these part of these days I have to digest, and then I know I have to be out front. How does that rhythm look for you?
Oh man, the run up to an election, I feel like I'm not a lawyer, but I feel it's probably what studying for the bar exam is like. I will lock myself in the office that I'm in right now, and I probably have a few sitting here. Yeah, here you go. Like, what do I have? All right, this is. I don't know if you can see it. Like, this is Kentucky, but I've spilled coffee on it like 4 times, so it's all. But I do a bunch of these, for each state, and they're just generally like county outline maps. But sometimes it's more like cities, zoom in. But I'm just like on each one, I'm kind of looking at a specific demographic or voting history or trend, and it's just an exercise of like what I'm trying to do is simultaneously kind of commit to my memory what the counties are in each state, trying to commit some instant sort of sense of what the politics of the county are, some kind of fact about the county. And the thing I'm always telling myself is, 99.9% of what I study in the months leading up to an election is never going to make it on the air. But I want to be ready when suddenly, we need to know something about a place that, that we weren't expecting to know about. So I'm just going through, and it's like each election, the stress level gets higher and higher for me because it's like, what in a healthy, like if I was, I guess, smarter or something or whatever, it would be like, the more I did this, the more confident I would get in what I know. Instead, the more I do it, the more I realize what I don't know and can never possibly know. And it just becomes more daunting and more anxiety producing.
Yep. I hear you. There's a humility that comes with doing it with the longevity, I guess, because if you do elections long enough, there's more opportunity to get things wrong, or just you realize what you don't know. That's well said.
And it's like, and it's such a, there's so much prep that goes into, it's one night or it's, 5 nights in 2020, but it's short. And it's like, I remember talking to a guy who calls horse races for a living. And I mean, sort of similar, like he would call the big ones. And what's the Kentucky Derby? It's 2 minutes. The whole thing lasts 2 minutes. What's the prep for it? It's so much prep, and you have to nail it in those 2 minutes. And he talked about the pressure of, with each new Derby, he felt that pressure more and more and more, and it eventually was too much.
Well, let's talk about one specific race that's coming up this year. I didn't mention it earlier, Steve, that you got your start writing for Politics NJ back in the day, back when the owner was anonymous, and I think you were one of the only people using your real name to write. But this year, New Jersey is hosting one of the 2 big races for governor. There's been limited public polling. The most recent Quinnipiac survey had Democrat Mikey Sherrill leading Republican Jack Ciattarelli by 8 points. Emerson College poll had it tied. And then a new Democratic poll released this morning by the Sherrill campaign had her up 7. What are the numbers that you're looking at, or what do you see in this race this year?
Yeah, I think Ciattarelli has a chance. I think this is the of the two, Virginia and New Jersey. I think this is where the action is. It seems. The number that I'm looking at, I guess, put it this way: that Emerson poll you mentioned shows the challenge for Ciattarelli. Obviously, look, blue state, Trump's president. It tends to vote for the party that doesn't control the White House in a presidential election, and Trump's approval rating is 41% in New Jersey in the Emerson poll. That said, the Emerson poll also finds Phil Murphy, the outgoing Democratic governor, term limited out, 35% approval rating. So you've got Democratic rule in Trenton. Murphy is somebody who Ciattarelli almost beat in 2021, kind of overperformed expectations, lost by 3 points in that race. So I think if you're a Republican and you want to answer the question, how could you possibly win a blue state with Trump in the White House? You would say, look what's going on in Trenton. Look at all Democratic rule in Trenton. I think you would look at some trends in the state as well. South Jersey in particular, a lot of sort of these, blue collar, non-college white areas in South Jersey that have been friendly to Democrats have become a lot more hostile in the last 5-10 years. It was part of why Ciattarelli was able to come so close in 21. I think couple that with Murphy's weak standing in the state, that element of it could still be there. You looked at, I think a key question for me in this is there are a number of sort of suburban areas where you're going to see higher concentrations of, voters with college degrees, higher incomes, or places like that have been really allergic to Trump, where Ciattarelli made big strides in 21. And my question in those places is, those seem like the cross-pressured voters in this election. I think on pocketbook issues and maybe some other things, I don't think they're too fond of Murphy and the Democrats in Trenton, and I don't think they have a problem with Ciattarelli overall. They were willing to vote for him in 21, but they do have a problem with Trump. And in 21, Trump was no longer president. So I think it might have been easier for them to go to the Republican column and vote for Ciattarelli then than it might be in 25 with Trump back in the White House. So what is the priority for a voter in a place like that? Is it delivering a message to Trump and not voting for Ciattarelli, or is it delivering a message to Murphy and the Democrats in their home state and voting for Ciattarelli again? Kind of think that's going to be key to the decisive to the election.
And also, right, there's this question of which voters will show up, right? Because this is kind of this weird off year election. I'm curious from your time reporting on the ground in New Jersey, if you have a sense of, how much are people paying attention to these races in state? I mean, how big a deal are these odd year elections? And is the concern also for Ciattarelli that those lower propensity voters who came out and voted for Trump for the first time, either because they were voting for the first time or because they felt like they wanted to switch their vote from the last time they voted for a Democrat, the concern that they just don't show up because they're not either aware that there's a race going on or it's just not high on the priority list as opposed to a presidential election.
Yeah, I think that's the bad news for Ciattarelli. And that is, I think the voters that Trump made the big strides with in 2024, when his improvement in New Jersey, Trump's, was as good as in any state in the country relative to 2020, last year. But those gains came in places like, here's an example, like Union City, New Jersey, this is 82% Hispanic, a lot of Cuban American. It's across from New York City, Hudson River, very densely populated. Trump lost it by 45 points in 2020, and he got it all the way down to 17 in 2024. And I think in 2016, it was like 60 something. So we talk about this trend of Hispanic voters going toward Trump that accelerated in 24. Union City is like perfect example of it. Now, when Ciattarelli ran in 2021, he got the doors blown off in Union City. I think he lost it by 70. And the problem for Ciattarelli is, and for Republicans everywhere for that matter, is in places like Union City, I think you had a lot of first-time voters. You had a lot of voters who don't vote in non-presidential elections, younger voters. I think that kind of was powering Trump's gains in a place like Union City. The idea that they're going to work for a non-Trump candidate in a non-presidential year is very suspect to me. And then you have to add on top of that, I'm mentioning Union City, like political machines are still real in part of New Jersey. Like arguably the strongest political machine in New Jersey and one of the strongest in the country, local political machine, is in Union City, New Jersey. It's a Democratic machine. And they, this is the thing you learn about New Jersey politics. It's sort of like the lower the stakes to the average voter, the more the machine cares about it. So the machine wasn't there to churn out the vote for Kamala Harris in 2024. There's no jobs, there's no contracts in who wins the presidential election. But when you're talking about like a gubernatorial election, now it's different. Now you want to deliver. And so that machine, I think, is probably back there activated for the Democrats. So I think that the problem for Chitterelli is when you look at those Trump gains, boy, it's hard to see him realizing much of that this year. Now, anything he can is a bonus for him because he did so poorly 4 years ago. But the good news for Chitterelli, like I said, is that when he came within 3 points of winning in 2021, he did it without any of those Trump gains. The Chitterelli strengths are really kind of like totally different demographically and regionally than the Trump gains. If he can somehow combine the two, there's a winning hand in there.
And that's a good segue to the immediate question that's going to come up as the results from this year's elections come in is how relevant are this year's elections in Virginia and New Jersey or Democratic overperformance in special elections around the country? How relevant are those results in your mind to the 2026 midterms?
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Democratic overperformance in the special elections, or in a thing like the Wisconsin state Supreme Court race earlier this year. To me, I'm becoming very accustomed to low turnout, and there is a disproportionate motivation there in that Democratic anti-Trump base. And part of it is to do with what we were just saying a second ago about, think of a place like Union City, right, where it's like the energy was there for Trump himself in a presidential election year among voters who don't turn out typically in non-presidential years. So, I mean, one of the things we saw, I remember pulling the stat in Wisconsin in that state Supreme Court race earlier this year, the turnout levels relative to 2024. If you looked at the Hispanic precincts in Milwaukee, where Trump had made big gains, the turnout just fell off a cliff there in the state Supreme Court election earlier the year. If you looked in Madison, where it's just chock full of a lot of college educated white voters, higher income, all of these core surge anti-Trump demographics, the turnout was at like 80-90% of the level of the 24 presidential. So I mean, when I see these Democratic overperformances, I kind of, that's what I sort of see. When I look at New Jersey, so here's the thing, like play it out, right? Like if you're the Republicans and you lose New Jersey and you lose Virginia, I think a lot of them already think they're going to lose Virginia. But if you lose them both, you're going to say, well, listen, Trump's the president, and that's what happens in these states. The White House party loses them. Okay. Now, if you're the Democrats and you end up losing New Jersey, you're going to say, well, look, you're missing it. It's not the president that matters here. It's the incumbent party in Trenton, because no party has won a third consecutive term in New Jersey, a gubernatorial term, in like 65 years. So, Phil Murphy's been the governor for 2 terms. It's that, is that what's overriding the national concern? So they each sort of have their excuse they could point to. But certainly I think, look, if you're looking ahead to 2026 and you're Republicans and you're looking for some argument about if you could win New Jersey and Trump's had a 40% approval rating in New Jersey, I do think that says there could be some conditions there that help you, hold on to the House potentially in this new atmosphere we live in.
We love our records in politics and our streaks, but I particularly appreciate when we have elections where some streak has to be broken. I think those are useful moments for us to kind of recalibrate how we talk about things that, it's been 65 years or it's never happened, or, and sometimes people can lean too hard into those historical trends without paying attention to what's going to happen in the future. And so I always appreciate when an election has to prove one historical trend out of several, or at least one historical trend wrong, no matter what, no matter who wins.
It's never happened till it's happened, right?
And it's exactly as we transition to talking about some other things you get to talk about. But the field goal kicker, he hasn't missed a kick this year or in 3 years. And of course that's right. They say that right before.
Yeah, they said that about Brandon Aubrey.
Oh, they give him the kiss of death.
Every kick from 60 plus he made against my Giants 2 weeks ago, and it didn't work every time. I was like, they said it, so he's going to miss it, and then boom, 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 finally.
Welcome to Football Night in America. I hope you had a great start to 2021. Tirico, Dungy, Sims, Harrison. We've got Mr. Florio, Mr. Kornacki ready to roll with us to sort who is in, who is out before all the playoffs and the matchups. We'll just take a deep breath. Eagles. Steve Kornacki's going back to his day job and talking politics on Tuesday, but his Sunday job is still very busy because tonight, Steve, we're down to one spot.
And this is a really fun one. I think the story here, Mike, in the NFC East is who is going to end up missing the most opportunities between Washington and the Giants. How did we ever get in the situation we're in tonight? Here's the road to here over the last month. You saw this was December 6th. You remember Washington knocked off Pittsburgh. The Giants had knocked off Seattle. They were tied atop the division. The Giants actually had the tiebreaker. So the Giants had the opportunity then to take charge in this division. It was theirs to lose. And lose they did. The next week, it was the Giants who lost to the Cardinals. Washington beat San Fran. Now, Washington in the driver's seat. It's Washington's division to lose, and Washington lost the next week.
So, Steve, I can picture in my mind the cubicle that you sat in at roll call. It was a few years ago, and now you're doing football analysis on Football Night in America on NBC. You're doing Kentucky Derby analysis. You're on the Today Show. What happened? How did we get here? How are you getting these opportunities?
Yeah, no, I know. It's sort of like I'm afraid to pinch myself because I'll wake up and realize this was all a figment of my imagination. No, believe me, I feel incredibly lucky. It happened, after it was right after the 2020 election. And I remember I got a call probably 4 or 5 days after that election, somebody at my boss here at on the news side saying, "Hey, are you do you follow the NFL?" And I was sort of like, "Yeah." And he's asked me a few questions, and I'm thinking like, does this guy like have a box at like Giant Stadium, and he's going to give me tickets to it? Is that what he's sort of building towards? He says no, and then he ends up saying no. They're asking me at NBC Sports if you want to come on Football Night in America. I was like, well, yes. No, so I told him, I was like, listen, I'd be watching the show at home if I wasn't on it. My one concern doing it, when we first started out on the NFL side was just, I said, I just want to make sure this is not just like shtick. This is not just a gimmick where it's sort of like, okay, there's this, roll up the sleeves and I'll gesticulate wildly and ha ha ha. So, and they said, no, we want to do the playoff chase, and it's all, it's probability based analysis of the playoff chase for the final, like 6 weeks of the season. And I found right away that it was sort of like, it was just very similar to doing the run up to an election where, I'm looking at the road to 270 and I'm looking at probabilities in each state, combinations of state, scenarios, all of this sort of thing. And we're just, we're looking at the same thing from the lens of who's going to make the playoffs. So I thought it fit nicely. I've enjoyed it. I've been lucky. They've had me back. You mentioned horse racing. That's my, it's my number one sport, and getting to do that's like a real treat. And they even put me on the dog show, which I know nothing about dogs, but it's fun to do.
Well, what's been the most, and maybe it's the Kentucky Derby, what's been the most surreal of all of those different opportunities and moments so far? What's been the like, what in the, I thought I was going to be a dentist growing up, and here I am doing this.
It was, the first year they sent me down to the Derby. I will say, like, I was super nervous because before the race, they go around and everybody who's part of the broadcast, it's a big broadcast for Derby Day. They bring everybody out. You can make your pick, and it's supposed to be, it's fun. It's lighthearted. There's no penalty for getting it wrong. But I felt like, I'm kind of the new guy here. I'm coming in from like a politics background. People are probably sort of like, what is this? So I was like, I wanted to get this right. I mean, you always want to get it right, obviously, but I really wanted to get it right. And I was like, I agonized. I'm like, should I just take the favorite? Because it's sort of like, look, I play it safe. If I get it wrong, everybody gets it wrong, with me. Maybe the horse wins, and I'll look smart enough that I, had that. But I didn't like the favorite. And I'm looking around, and I kind of got this hunch, and I'm like, I've had some bad hunches before. I hope this isn't one of. So I went with it on air. I had this horse who I thought could just get to the front right away and maybe take him around, maybe just go gate to wire in front. So I picked the horse. The race goes off. The horse goes to the front, and they're going through one pole after another. The horse is still, and they turn for home, still in front. And I'm like, this actually wins the race. And I at 12-1, the odds are 12-1. And I mean, I'm like, I'm down there at the track. I'm going crazy down there. This is like, I couldn't have drawn this up any better. And the postscript on that story is that, and I cashed out. I got my ticket, but a week later, they retroactively announced that the horse had flunked the drug test. This was Medina Spirit, if you remember the name, from about 4 years ago.
Oh,
they
wow.
stripped him of the title, but I kept the money. So.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And if they asked you, if the bosses asked you if you had to choose between sports full-time, politics full-time, you only could do one, which one would you choose?
Well, put it this way. I do the politics and the elections so that I get to do sports.
There we go. There we go. And now it's time for our final segment, Look What I Found, where we talk about anything that we've been into recently. Usually it's not politics. Jacob, what did you find?
So I went to the movies. I saw the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie, One Battle After Another, with Leonardo DiCaprio, Tiana Taylor, Chase Infinity, Sean Penn doing like an insane, bizarro G.I. Joe psychopathic character. Benicio del Toro giving like an all-time performance. He was wonderful in this. An amazing cast all around. A super fun, intense movie. I saw it in IMAX, which I absolutely recommend. If you can get to an IMAX theater, there's a sequence toward the end of the movie. That's not a spoiler, but it's a car chase, and it is just so monumental in size and scope on the IMAX screen. I'm a big believer in seeing movies as directors intended them to be seen, and so if you're able to, but the film, it's incredibly relevant. It was based on a Thomas Pynchon novel, and say what you want about the guy, but he had an eye and an ear for understanding where things were going to go in this country. And an unsparing wit and incisiveness in his writing, and that certainly comes through in the movie. So I really enjoyed it. Nathan, I don't know if this is for your kids, but it might be for you at the very least.
And was it IMAX or IMAX Experience? Right? Don't they try to? You went to an actual like giant screen.
This
IMAX.
was a big boy IMAX. This was a tall screen, the right aspect. This was not a Georgetown AMC IMAX. Not to drag them too much, but no, this was a real. I'm in the Midwest, so the IMAX screens are they got a lot of space to build real IMAX screens out here.
Steve, what did you find?
Well, I just want to ask about that first. So I know if so IMAX Experience is like fake IMAX. If I ever see that, like, is that what it is?
Yeah, I don't know what the parameters, how they still call it IMAX, but there are things that are called IMAX Experience that are on normal size screens. We might be getting a call or an email from IMAX folks, but yeah, you should be careful to make sure that it is actually a giant screen.
Okay, no, good. Well, I'm the kind of person who would
Wow.
fall for that, so I was just I'm glad to have that information. I'll say what I found was SEC football. I said I grew up in Massachusetts, and I went to a school that was you say it's not a football school. They cut the football team my freshman year, so I never got the like big school, big campus, big game day experience, and got to go this weekend down to Oxford, Mississippi, and Mississippi, LSU, Ole Miss, LSU, big SEC showdown. Got the tailgate in the Grove, which is supposed to be like the best tailgating experience they say in the country. It's got to be right up there, I would think. Unbelievable. The weather was perfect. It was incredible experience on campus, and Ole Miss pulled the upset, knocked off LSU, and number 4 in the country. And so I learned also that you say when Ole Miss wins, you go hotty toddy. So there you go.
And when you're at a game or tailgating, are people? I mean, you're on TV a lot regularly. I mean, do people come up to you? Are you able to just enjoy a regular tailgate, or are you being TV personality Steve Kornacki?
Fortunately, a lot of the people around you have been, what would you say, well served. And so most aren't noticing details.
That's good. Then you can just enjoy the experience.
Exactly.
Well, on a slightly different level, but still football, I found that the Dallas Dragons, my alma mater in Oregon, they're pretty good at football this year. They're ranked number 3 in the state of Oregon in 5A. They're playing their rival Central this week, and I will be on the ground, not reporting, just on the ground supporting the Dragons this week. So I'm excited. I haven't been to a home football game in a long time, so I'm excited to be there.
What are the odds?
I don't know. The Dragons are ranked higher,
Okay.
but anytime you're playing a rival, but Dallas still has a couple, Silverton and West Albany. I mean, those are always tough games. So hopefully I don't jinx it and they continue to have success until they get to those really tough games. So,
go Dragons.
That's right. Steve, thank you for joining us. This has been fun, and we'll keep watching you continue to go up and up.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Had fun too.
At Inside Elections, we provide nonpartisan analysis of congressional, presidential, and gubernatorial races. With a combination of reporting and data, we break down the key races and bring valuable context to complex elections. Please go to InsideElections.com to subscribe to the bi-weekly newsletter. We have individual subscriptions as well as group packages that are tailored to boost association and corporate PACs. If you like today's episode, please subscribe, tell a friend, leave a comment, click the thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe there as well. If you didn't like today's episode, please email Mike Tirico. We also wanted to thank our producers, Alan Tazinski and Melissa Lenner of Pretty Easy Podcasts. If you want to start your own podcast, please contact Alan and Melissa and check them out. And we want to thank our associate producer, Conrad Tolosa. Please come back and join us again next time.